Good afternoon. This is Don't Tell Me, Ask Me. I'm Beverley Webb and I'm a recovery practitioner, and I specialise in trauma and adults overcoming adverse childhood experiences such as abuse, physical, sexual, emotional and bullying. And I'm very pleased and excited to say hello, not introduce, but say hello to my guest today, which is Patricia Worby, or Dr Patricia Worby actually. Patricia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Delighted to be here actually. It's really lovely. Thank you for inviting me. So I am in the middle of a new phase in my life where I've become a trauma therapist, much to my surprise, because it wasn't planned. It was never planned that way. In fact, I started life thinking as a kid that I'd go into science because that was my passion in life. And I did. I went to university and I studied biochemistry and pharmacology and various other things. But life didn't prove to be that easy for a woman in science. And several times I ended up in jobs that were not as advertised. And eventually I got made redundant. And when I was made redundant, I didn't know what else to do. So I decided the only thing I loved doing more than science was gardening, because I'd grown up, my dad was a very keen gardener. And so just temporarily, I said, I'm going to just do gardening for a while until I worked out what I want to do in life. And that temporarily turned into 25 years of designing and planting gardens. So that's kind of where I was, age, I think 34 I was, when my relationship broke down, and it was such a shock, and I lost my home and had to move out into temporary digs and live with other people who I didn't know, and it was all really horrible. And I managed to get through that period, but about 18 months after that happened, my body just crashed.
Yeah.
And I went into what I know now is sort of adrenal fatigue, it's sometimes called, or certainly imbalance. And I got very, very ill indeed. I couldn't get out of bed. I had to go to my mum to be nursed because I literally couldn't get up to feed myself. There was no name for that at the time. Chronic fatigue was never mentioned. It was sort of like, oh, you're depressed, or
Yes.
you need all of those things. So I was given multiple drugs which didn't really do anything. And eventually I kind of turned to alternative medicine, as it was called then, because I had nothing else to turn to, because I'd gone down the route of being drugged. And so I went and had a acupuncture session with somebody, and it was very much against my belief system, which was, if I was a scientist, you see, so acupuncture was a bit woo-woo for me. But I was really shocked, because within 3 days I started to feel better after 18 months of feeling barely able to function. And it kind of just threw me, and it totally changed my worldview. And after that, I started to decide to have a look into this. What was it in this field that had eluded my doctor, that there were no answers out there. And then I studied massage and emotional freedom technique and Reiki, and I was just so excited to find that there was this whole other way of looking at the human body.
And it's funny, isn't it? I didn't come from a biomedical background. However, I trusted, because some experiences I've had similar, I trusted the medical system. And it was a chemist that took me aside because I took a prescription in for migraine. And he said, oh, can I just show you this? And he showed me alternative ways and explained that it started from the gut, etc. But that was just so woo-woo. It was like, and I took certain psyllium husks. That was the start of it. And over the years, I was in and out of the medical and the holistic. Whereas now, the balance is completely the other way. Not saying there isn't a place for medical, because there is, but more holistic first.
So definitely, there's a place for medical intervention in acute situations. So, I break my wrist, I go to
Yeah.
hospital. I have appendicitis, I go and get that dealt with.
Yes.
I've got, you know, something that occurs in the short term that needs dealing with, I would go and get medical advice. But when you've got chronic conditions that have a whole history, you mentioned migraines. Well, I'd had migraines since I was 9 or 10 and began puberty, basically. Terrible migraines where I would have to lie in a darkened room and I would throw up, and you know, it's just awful. Nobody ever said there are problems in your gut here. You know, you have an inflammatory gut and it's affecting your liver, and the liver isn't able to cleanse your blood, and when your dirty blood goes into your brain, it gives you a migraine. It's like, oh, I would have understood, but that was never explained. So I think, you know, for me, it was finding out that there were answers, there were ways we can take back control of our health and well-being. And for me, that gradually led me to look into the emotional component as well. So, you know, I started with the physical, as most people do. They change their diet, they kind of cleanse themselves, they do those sorts of things. And then I sort of looked at the emotional side, because I couldn't really avoid it anymore, because it was clear something had happened to me. And what it appears, finally, I came to realize through counseling and other sort of psychotherapy, was the relationship breakdown I alluded to in my history had triggered the loss of my father when I was 19, you know, because he'd been ill throughout my childhood.
Yeah.
And although I didn't have a typical abusive or dysfunctional family, I had a very average family background. There were things in my history which were traumatic. So my dad being always ill and always going in and out of hospital to have his lungs drained, which is a really horrible, painful process. And then having to have one removed and thinking he might die, and then having him come back really depressed and very different. And we always had to, you know, teeter around not upsetting him, and, you know, walking on eggshells to try and make sure he wasn't distressed or upset by anything. So I became the good teenager. You know, I did not rebel. I did nothing to upset anyone. And but you know, to try, as a child does, to make everything okay. And then he died very suddenly, age 19. I had just gone to university, so, you know, just got out of childhood and into my adult life, and I just, first day, the first year, first term, bang, he died. So it was such a shock, but I couldn't deal with it because I was dissociating all over the place. I was basically in such shock I couldn't process what had happened, and I wasn't at home to have my family to support me, although they did say you can come home if you want and you can repeat that year. You know, I chose not to because I couldn't face the pain. I certainly
we're also built for survival, aren't we? So it's an instinctive reaction, and we all react in different ways. So for you, your survival mechanism at that time, like you say, was to disassociate and focus yourself in your learning.
That's what I did. Okay, that's exactly what I did. I just said, no, I'm not coming back. I'm just going to carry on as if nothing's changed. And that was quite successful, and I did okay, and I graduated, and as I said, I went into science, and then my relationship, my first long-term relationship of I think it was 9 years, broke down, and then I had to leave my home and leave my cats and leave my life, basically, and everything came crashing down. You know, not just the loss of that, but the loss of my family when I was growing up. And I had not realized that these things live on in the body. I assumed it was a mental problem. And that's why, sorry.
No, sorry. We get so involved in this. But when we talk about mental health, how many times do people talk about mental health as if a talking therapy on its own will resolve everything? But there's a connection, isn't there?
So stress, particularly chronic unpredictable stress in childhood, downregulates repair in your body. Okay, so you become more inflamed, more liable to infections, because immunity takes a lot of energy as well. Digestive issues, skin problems, you know.
Yeah.
Stress comes out in the skin because it's all to do with the liver. So it's really mind and body, and you can't divorce them.
No.
And that's a mistake that modern medicine has made, and said it's a mental health issue or it's a physical health issue. And there's just so much crosstalk between those two. And you know, I've dedicated my life actually to talking about this, that what we think affects how we feel, and what we feel affects our gut, and our gut affects everything. So we can't say I have just a mental health issue, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you've got like anxiety, you've got excess neurotransmitters in your brain that are not in balance. And guess where your neurotransmitters are made? Not in your brain, actually. The vast majority are made in your gut, by your gut microbes. So you've got a gut imbalance.
Yeah.
Now, who tells people that? You go, you know, I've got anxiety. You're given a pill.
And also the assumption that it's our brain that tells our gut what to do, but it's actually the opposite way, isn't it?
It's about 85% gut to brain and 15% brain to gut.
Yeah.
So the vast majority is going this way.
Yeah.
So actually the microbes give off certain chemicals. Apart from neurotransmitters, they produce other chemicals, peptides, that tell our brain how we're feeling. So much of what we feel is actually as the result of this dialogue, this two-way dialogue between brain and body. And it's like a dynamic system. And so when you get anxious, yes, it's an imbalance of chemicals in your brain, but the whole system is affected. It's not just one part of you. And so we have to have a truly holistic understanding, and we have to have a holistic treatment.
Yeah.
You know, so I know you do a lot of work on, you know, don't tell me, ask me. You know, when you go into a doctor's surgery, who asks you, how's your life going at the moment? What's going on for you?
And I have been asked, and like you, in the past, I was diagnosed as being depressed, and I was given antidepressants, and I was told these won't actually start working for another 5 to 6 weeks. And at the time, I was on the floor. I'd gone through a divorce, I'd moved, got settled with the children, and then thought, oh, we've got the summer. And that's my body went crash. But then 2 weeks later, I'm back in the surgery, and I'm feeling so much better. And the doctor's saying, but you can't do. And I again didn't have the knowledge back then to find the words to say I'm not depressed, because he's a doctor. Why would I argue? And I had nothing to back it up. It was only instinctive. So hence now, you know, we're both practitioners, and we come at trauma from a different angle and different way. And our lived experiences have been different, but our body has reacted in the same way.
Well, it's kind of scripted.
Yes.
It's a survival, as you said, it's a survival mechanism. And a lot of what happens is adjusted to the kind of life that we no longer live. So our stress response system is designed to protect us from acute stresses. A tiger jumps out at us. We need to run or go dead in order to survive, hoping that the tiger will get bored and walk away. All right. So those two options: you run or you freeze. Okay. And that system is embedded in the neurological nervous system as a fight and flight or freeze response. But the kinds of lives we live now, we don't get jumped by a tiger. We get relationships that break down. We get bullying. We get humiliation. We get financial stress. And they're chronic. They go on, and there's no way of running or fighting them. And so the responses we have are very limited, actually. And it's not your fault when you get depressed. It's your brain doing the preparation for death routine.
Yeah.
the freeze response. And it, as I said, it downregulates everything. Your cells go slow. It's called the cell danger response. It's like, oh, we're going to die. There's no point keeping up digestion. All right. You know, and there's no point thinking, because we just need to collapse now and hope that it will be restored, you know. We see this in animals, and our brains are not dissimilar. The bit that we have, the cortex, which is much, much bigger, is only 15% of our brain.
Yeah.
The rest is this back brain, the limbic brain and the brainstem, and it's very, very basic stuff. You know, it's about eating, sex, survival. The thinking part comes later. It's much less agile, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And that's the thing. Intuitively, our bodies are built. And when I say we're built for survival, sometimes our body, well, not sometimes, our body actually doesn't know when they feel something, when they get triggered into a response, how long ago you were actually in danger. They will respond immediately. It's about us being able to have tools and techniques to change our mind, get our mind to tell our body, you're safe, you're here, this is where you are.
Yeah.
You're in here and now, you're not back there, you're not in the future, you're here. And going back to what you were saying about having acupuncture, in the Western world, we've been very reluctant to accept some of the different options that are available that actually help our bodies repair themselves.
Yeah, precisely. So the holistic or naturopathic model says you remove the blocks to healing.
Yes.
Right? You don't symptom suppress, which is what modern medicine does. It says, you've got a headache, I'll take the pain away. Yeah. I won't change the cause of the pain or why you're getting the headache. I will just take the pain away. And then, of course, with depression, I'll numb you out, or I'll just take the symptom away, which actually prevents you from healing the root cause of the depression. Yeah. And so people are on these things for years, and then they get hooked on them and they can't come off.
Yeah.
Because there's a chemical dependency then.
And that's how we also self-medicate. And this is something that's interesting when you have conversations with people, because we look at addiction or self-medication and suppression of our emotions as we consider it just to be drugs or alcohol. We don't think about the overworking.
Oh, there's loads.
The retail therapy, you know, the continual study. We all do it as ways to shut off.
To stuff down the feelings.
Yes.
And because the feelings they feel like they might overwhelm us. The fear of feeling is much greater than the kind of will to overcome. So you say, oh, I've got a drink problem, or I've got a online shopping problem. I really must get a grip. But you've got 85% of your brain saying, yeah, go for it. Because the fear that the back brain has for coping with emotions is massive. You become very aversive to your own emotions, and that's where I was.
Yeah.
You know, not even realizing I had them, to be honest.
But it's a norm.
Yeah, you just feel normal. This is normal. I'm dead from the neck down, I think, but I don't feel. And that's how I was for years, and thought that was okay. And it served me very well through my 20s and 30s, the beginning of my 30s. But it wasn't whole. I wasn't whole. I wasn't living. I was surviving.
Yeah. And I think that is, like we said, our bodies are made to survive. And that's, in the end, what we do. We just survive. So anybody listening to us talking now, and they're thinking, oh, I can identify with some of this, but I wouldn't know where to start. You know, where do I find out more? What would you say to them right now?
Well, there's a whole host of stuff available online now. There are lots of doctors around the world, particularly in the US, talking about this kind of medicine, this kind of functional integrative medicine approach. And there's also a network of people who deal with trauma from the point of view of the body, which is what I do. But it's not talk therapy. We don't just talk about the trauma. Oh dear, that's terrible, that happened to you, how awful. We actually get you to acknowledge and feel the feelings.
Yes.
And so that's kind of trauma informed work, and there is lots out there that you can look up. The work of Bessel van der Kolk, for instance, he kind of kick-started it. Peter Levine, Pat Ogden. There are various people that are talking this language of the body as a way to change the brain.
And for me, Bessel van der Kolk is, you know, I find him amazing, and I recently did a course with him as well, because it's very much in alignment. But he also, what I find interesting, he actually shows you the physicality, the science, as well as the holistic side, which is fantastic because it's integrative, like we were saying. And that's, we're both certified practitioners with the chrysalis effect, and that's the foundations about the chrysalis effect. And I don't know about you, when I first came across the chrysalis effect with Elaine, talking with her, because we're both at yoga, which was a massive part of my recovery, it was really interesting because it wasn't just about coaching as that one goal, it's the growth. So it's the touching base, and it's the healing, but in a whole holistic approach, as you say.
Yeah. So healing is a process.
Yes.
It's not it's not a thing. It's like a thought is not a thing, it's a process, right? And so the solution to changing your body is to change everything that impacts on that. So your environment, your kind of your lifestyle, your meaning and purpose are all integrated in the body. This is how we are. We're, you know, not to get too woo-woo, but we're energetic beings.
Yes.
In a sea of energy. And thoughts have energy, beliefs have energy. And so to change anything, you have to really deal with the root causes and get down to what's going on in your life, and what are you unhappy with. I mean, you know, when the body collapses, I heard Gabor Mate talk about this the other day. He's another one of my heroes.
Yes.
And he was saying, what is it that your body is saying no to that you can't? Brilliant.
Well, see, I love that, because he's saying it in those words, in my words, because when I'm working with my clients as well, it's like you say, it's being able to feel, because I know I had severe trauma as a child, and I can disconnect it completely to any feeling. So whether that be physical and emotional, and then in recovery and healing, to be told that I'm going to feel again, that's the fear. It's not the reality, it's the fear. And so then it's a relearning. Okay, it's okay, I'm safe. I'm going to now recognize what's happening with my body and feel what's happening, and I'm still safe. And that's part of that process, isn't it? And then, okay, how do I feel emotionally? And then once you're able to acknowledge, because acknowledgement is the very first step in a way, isn't it? It's then saying, okay, if I, you know, life isn't one smooth road that we skip along, no matter how much we want to control it. But if something happens, it's like, okay, how do I currently feel? What do I need? And what do I want? So what do I need right now? Is it I need to nourish myself? I need some food. Is it I need some fresh air? Is it that I need some sleep? You know, and then what do I want? And then that's bringing in all different aspects.
So you can't answer the question, what do I want, until you know what you feel and what you need.
Absolutely.
And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They're like, I need to change my life, but I don't know what to do. And it's so overwhelming that they just don't do it.
No.
you touched upon safety. Now, safety is really key to trauma work. Okay, because if you don't feel safe because you were never taught to feel safe in your body, I mean, you haven't got this sort of baseline to return to that says I'm okay, even though I'm feeling sad or overwhelmed or angry. We have to teach the body to feel safe before we can allow ourselves to feel, before then we know what we want. You know, if you ask a person who's got trauma, what do you want? They don't even know where to access that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They know they want to change and get rid of the pain. That's all they know. But they don't know what they feel yet because they haven't been allowed to process in a safe relational environment. So in other words, in the eyes and being of another person who does not judge them, because there will be a lot of shame.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the fight or flight, instinctively your body might want to run, but if you're being held, that's where the shame and the guilt comes, because your body, to survive, wants to run, but it can't. And it may be that you're holding yourself, you know, because you can't physically run, and then that exacerbates that feeling of shame, judgment, etc. But the key thing is as well, and I love Brené Brown for this, is another key part of recovery and healing is being vulnerable. Now that word vulnerability, you tell that to a child who's surviving and in deep trauma, that's not in your vocabulary.
No.
Because you make yourself unsafe, and yet being vulnerable is a key part to establishing a relationship, with yourself, but with others.
And we need that in order to heal.
Yes.
Because we are relational beings. It's possible to make progress on your own, but it is so much easier with someone else who you trust and you feel is in harmony or resonance with you. And that's what's missing in a lot of people's childhoods, is somebody there for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
You didn't have anyone. I didn't really. I mean, I couldn't rely on anybody. And so we lose the faith that we can make change because we feel overwhelmed the minute we try and access what we feel. And so there's a fear of feeling, of course, a fear of fear, you know.
Yeah.
and hence the anxiety loop, you know, you get stuck.
Yes.
So
and that's where I was very lucky, and I always say I'm the woman I am today because of when I was in a children's home, because that was my safe environment. And actually the person who ran that home was my one person that went through my life until I was 16. Sadly, social services back then said, right, that's it, cut off, you can't be a part of her life anymore.
No, that's terrible.
It is. However, I'm blessed with the fact that I had that safe, and so that gave me something to work with. Looking back,
it gives you the sensation of being seen, heard and felt by another person, and that stays in procedural memory in this back brain part of your brain, okay? And it's a symbol of hope that one day you can return to that.
Yes.
It's what we try and do with our clients, isn't it? Give them a sense of hope.
Absolutely.
Without telling them, we can't say stop feeling the way you're feeling. Just cheer up, be positive. That doesn't work.
No.
We have to allow them to access the true depth of what they felt back then.
Yeah.
In order to be fully present in the now.
In the now.
And you said a minute ago about the brain and how the memories, sort of the triggers, feel, you know, uncontrollable because there's no sense of time in that part of the brain, all right? So it feels like it's happening again now. All the things that happened to you that were overwhelming in the past come up as a felt sense of overwhelm because there's no date stamp that says, oh, that was 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And now I can see it, but at the time you don't know. You just got used to it. But You're always in a hyper arousal state. Your third ear, I mean, you hear, you're just ready. And now when I think back, there are times where I completely relax, and then for a minute you think, oh, no, you can relax. It's just deep breath.
Yeah.
So we could carry on for hours, and
we could. I've thought about something I wanted to say to that, but I'll save it for another time.
No, please do.
Well, bouncing around between those two states of fight and flight and freeze is kind of what we call the window of tolerance.
Yes.
So in traumatized people, it's really, really small. They hardly ever touch into that it's okay state, which is the flow state, or parasympathetic social engagement, we call it. But the bit where you feel okay, right, is very tiny in traumatized people.
Yeah.
And our job really is to enlarge that so that they can be there more often and feel good about themselves more often. And so when they get triggered, they can recognize it, bring themselves back down. When they get depressed, recognize it, bring themselves back up. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're kind of manipulating this neurological change, and but in a good way. We're showing them how they can do it.
And that's why balance is one of my key words, because one of the other things that people don't realize is triggers and your body response with adrenaline can be because you're on a massive high as well as a massive low.
Yeah,
you'll get
excited.
a delayed reaction to that.
Yeah, and healing can sometimes trigger that reaction as well. When you get the absence of depression and you start to feel hopeful, you go straight up into fight and flight, and then you get terrified. So that's why it's easier to work with somebody and who can help modulate those experiences, and you can help to rationalize them and understand that they're all part of the healing journey. So anyway, we're proof.
we are proof, with many others as well. Now, would you like to share about some of your books?
Oh yes, if anyone's interested in discovering more, the main one I suppose for this conversation is The Scar That Won't Heal, which is available on Amazon.
And I will links in the comments section as well. Okay,
yeah. So that's about stress, emotion and trauma in chronic disease, but it's very much broader than that. It's about how the childhood experience lives on in the body. You know, your biography becomes your biology. And I do go into quite a lot of detail about the biology because that's my background, it's my passion, is how it changes the body physiologically and then what you can do about it. So I wrote that one back in 2015. I've just updated it actually because I like to update with the latest info. And being it's an ebook, but it's also printed. You can, and an audio now as well. And then I've written 3 others now as well on different aspects. The second one was on the microbiome, which is all about the bugs in your gut. That's the world within. And then there was another on aging, healthy aging, which is losing our minds. And the final one, which is just out, is Life Illuminated, which is all about the electromagnetic kind of nature of the human and how we can heal via our biophysics, if you like, rather than just our chemistry. So it's all very exciting stuff.
Well, we had an interesting conversation before we actually started recording, didn't we? Which was really interesting about how you're just quickly in just a minute or so. Yeah, okay. So eyesight, you've all been told that failing eyesight is a natural part of aging and there's nothing you can do about it apart from wearing glasses or contact lenses. But it's based on an erroneous understanding of how the brain interprets what it sees. It's not about lazy eye muscles. It's actually a neurological problem, and it can be reversed because the brain is able to change its neurological connections, and you can do certain exercises that improve and in some cases revert your eyesight back to what it was. I don't wear glasses, I'm 56. I can't say I do it religiously, but I've done quite a lot of the exercises, and I have an app on my phone, and it's very easy to do. And it just it keeps your brain working optimally so that you can adjust to the different signals better. This understanding is not understood in conventional ophthalmology. It's just, but you can change your eyesight too. Well, I'm very interested in hearing that. Well, Tricia, thank you so much, because it's been interesting as ever.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. For anyone who's watching and you want to know more, I will put links in the comments. The chrysalis effect, you'll find details of both of us on there and other practitioners as well. So, time to say goodbye and thank you very much.
Sadly. Lovely. Thanks, Beverley. Take care.